Why so many of us feel lost and what's actually happening? Most people think feeling lost means something is wrong, but psychologically, feeling lost is often a sign that something is developing, not collapsing, developing. And that's what we're going to talk about tonight. Why so many people in their 20s and 30s feel behind, confused, restless, disconnected, even when nothing is technically wrong. 1. The myth of the arrival. We grow up believing there's a point where we arrive. Graduate, get the job, get the relationship, get the stability. And then what? Peace, clarity, certainty. But here's what psychology tells us. Human development doesn't stop at adulthood. In fact, adulthood is when identity becomes unstable again. When we're teenagers, we're forming identity. But in our 20s and 30s, we're testing it. That's why things start to feel shaky. You realize the career you chose at 18 might not fit at 28. The relationship you wanted at 21 might not fit at 31. The city you thought was perfect might suddenly feel too small. This isn't failure. This is identity recalibration. 2. The quarter-life crisis is real. Researchers call it the quarter-life crisis. It usually shows up between 25 and 35. Symptoms include career doubt, relationship anxiety, comparison spirals, fear of missing out, feeling behind, questioning everything. It's not dramatic like a midlife crisis. It's quieter, more internal, more existential. It feels like, is this it? What am I building? Why does everyone else look more certain? But here's the key. Most people are questioning at the same time. They're just not talking about it because uncertainty feels embarrassing. 3. Social media distorts time. There's something historically unique happening right now. For the first time in history, you can see everyone's highlight reel daily. And your brain isn't designed for that. Psychologically, comparison used to be local. You compared yourself to classmates, neighbors, co-workers. Now you compare yourself to influencers, entrepreneurs, strangers, your age across the world. People at completely different life stages. Your brain registers all of it as competition, even when it's not. This creates artificial pressure. It feels like everyone is ahead, but what you're actually seeing is curated progress. Not the debt, not the doubt, not the therapy sessions, not the panic at 2 a.m., just the wins, and your brain fills in the rest. 4. Why stability can feel like suffocation. There's a psychological concept called hedonic adaptation. It means humans quickly adapt to improvements. You get the job, you're excited. 3 months later, it's normal. You move into a new place. It feels amazing. 6 months later, it's just home. The brain is wired to normalize gains. That's why achievement doesn't produce permanent satisfaction. And when people reach stability, they sometimes mistake boredom for failure. But boredom isn't always negative. It can be a signal that growth needs to shift internally, not externally. 5. Identity versus performance. Here's something important. Many people build performance before identity. They learn how to function, how to achieve, how to look successful, but they never ask, who am I outside of output? So when work slows down, or a relationship ends, or external validation fades, they feel empty because performance was filling the gap. True identity feels steady. It's not dependent on applause, but building it requires time alone, reflection, honest questioning, and that can feel uncomfortable. 6. Why friendships change. There's developmental psychology behind drifting friendships. In early adulthood, friendships are proximity based. School, university, shared environment. In later adulthood, friendships become values based, and values evolve. That's why some friendships dissolve without conflict. It's not betrayal, it's divergence. And psychologically, humans resist divergence because belonging is safety, but growth often requires temporary isolation. 7. The brain at 30 is different than at 20. The prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for decision making, long term planning, risk evaluation, fully develops around 25 to 28, which means many of your early life decisions were made before your brain was fully calibrated. That's not a mistake, it's biology. That's why career changes in your late 20s aren't instability, they're cognitive maturity catching up. 8. The fear of starting over. Psychologically, humans fear loss more than they value gain. This is called loss aversion. We overestimate what we'll lose and underestimate what we'll gain. So even if a job drains us, we stay. Even if a relationship feels misaligned, we hesitate. Even if a city feels wrong, we rationalize because loss feels immediate. Growth feels uncertain. But often, what feels like safety is actually slow dissatisfaction. 9. What actually creates peace. Research consistently shows long-term satisfaction comes from meaningful relationships, autonomy, growth, contribution, health, not status, not income alone, not comparison wins. When people feel lost, it's often because one of those pillars is misaligned, and the brain is signaling it, not with alarms, but with restlessness. 10. You're not behind, you're calibrating. Feeling behind is common between 27 and 35. But most people aren't behind, they're calibrating, adjusting direction, testing values, rebuilding identity. And that process feels unstable. But instability isn't collapse, it's construction. Closing reflection. If you feel uncertain right now, that doesn't mean you failed. It means your brain is evolving. Your identity is expanding. Your standards are refining. And growth is happening beneath the surface. It doesn't need to look dramatic. It just needs to be honest. And sometimes the most productive thing you can do is pause long enough to ask, am I building something aligned? Not impressive. Not loud, aligned, because alignment feels quiet, but it lasts. There's another layer to feeling stuck that most people misunderstand. It's not laziness, it's not lack of ambition, it's not weakness, it's dopamine dysregulation. Dopamine is often called the pleasure chemical, but that's not entirely accurate. Dopamine is actually the motivation chemical. It's the signal that says, this is worth pursuing. And in modern life, dopamine is everywhere. Short videos, notifications, food delivery, endless scrolling, instant entertainment. Your brain gets small, fast rewards constantly. And over time, this changes your baseline. Tasks that used to feel neutral now feel boring. Long-term goals feel exhausting. Deep focus feels unnatural, not because you're incapable, but because your brain is adapting to speed. Here's what's happening neurologically. When you consume quick, high stimulation content, your dopamine spikes quickly, but it also drops quickly. And when it drops, you feel restless. So you seek another spike and another and another. This trains your brain to prefer short cycles. But meaningful work, career building, fitness, learning, relationships, doesn't operate on quick spikes. It operates on slow accumulation, which means it feels less stimulating at first. And when your brain is conditioned for fast stimulation, slow progress feels like failure. But it's not failure, it's recalibration. This is why people say, I just don't feel motivated anymore. Motivation hasn't disappeared, it's been fragmented. Your brain is overstimulated in small bursts and understimulated in depth. That creates a strange feeling, constant distraction, paired with low drive, and the solution isn't extreme discipline overnight. It's gradual dopamine retraining, lower stimulation, longer focus windows, intentional boredom. Boredom is not the enemy. Boredom resets sensitivity. When you remove constant stimulation, simple tasks feel engaging again. Reading feels immersive. Conversations feel richer. Work feels clearer. There's also a psychological pattern called avoidance looping. When something feels overwhelming, your brain avoids it. Avoidance gives temporary relief. Relief feels good, so your brain reinforces avoidance. The task remains unfinished. Anxiety increases, avoidance increases, and the loop continues. Breaking that loop doesn't require heroic effort. It requires starting small. 5 minutes of effort, not 2 hours. The brain learns safety through exposure, not force. Another reason motivation drops is lack of meaning. Humans can endure effort if effort feels purposeful, but effort without connection to identity feels draining. Ask yourself, does what I'm doing connect to who I want to become? Not who impresses others, not who looks successful, but who feels aligned internally. When action connects to identity, discipline becomes lighter. Still effort, but lighter. There's also something called cognitive overload. Modern adults process more information daily than previous generations processed in months. News, opinions, financial pressure, global uncertainty. Your brain is constantly scanning for threat, even subconsciously. That consumes energy, and when mental energy is low, ambition drops. It's not laziness, it's cognitive saturation. Reducing input can increase output, less noise, more clarity. Another overlooked factor is sleep. Sleep directly regulates emotional control, motivation, and focus. Even mild sleep deprivation reduces dopamine receptor sensitivity, which means the same effort feels harder. But most adults normalize fatigue. They assume exhaustion is personality. It's not, it's physiology. Stabilizing sleep often restores drive faster than a motivation hacks. There's also the illusion of perfect timing. Many people wait to feel ready, ready to apply, ready to change careers, ready to start the project, ready to leave the relationship. But readiness rarely arrives first. Action creates readiness. Confidence is built through repetition, not contemplation. The brain gains certainty after movement, not before. It's important to understand something else. Discipline is not intensity, it's consistency. And consistency is built through identity. If you see yourself as someone who trains, training becomes default. If you see yourself as someone who writes, writing becomes expected. Identity reduces friction. That's why small habits matter. They're not about output, they're about reinforcing self perception. And here's something subtle but powerful: your environment shapes behavior more than motivation does. If your phone is always within reach, you will reach for it. If junk food is visible, you will eat it. If distractions are constant, focus will struggle. Changing environment reduces reliance on willpower, and willpower is a limited resource. Structure beats intensity. There's also emotional suppression. Many people numb stress instead of processing it through scrolling, through entertainment, through overworking. Unprocessed stress consumes bandwidth. And when emotional bandwidth is low, ambition drops. Processing emotions restores capacity. Even simple reflection helps. Writing, walking, talking honestly. Clarity restores energy. If you feel stuck right now, ask yourself three questions. Am I overstimulated? Am I avoiding something uncomfortable? Am I building toward something meaningful? You don't need dramatic transformation. You need alignment, lower noise, small action, clear identity. Momentum builds slowly, but once it builds, it compounds. The truth is, most people are not unmotivated. They are distracted, overstimulated, and disconnected from meaning. And those are solvable, not overnight, but steadily, and steady progress is more powerful than sudden intensity. If things feel heavy, don't assume something is wrong with you. Assume something needs adjusting. Because the brain is adaptive, it responds to environment, it responds to repetition, it responds to direction, and even small directional shifts create long-term change. And there's something else that rarely gets talked about. Uncertainty is uncomfortable because the brain is wired for prediction. Your brain constantly tries to answer one question What happens next? When you don't know what happens next, career-wise, relationship-wise, life direction-wise, your nervous system interprets that as risk, even if nothing is actually wrong. That's why feeling lost feels physical sometimes. Tight chest, restlessness, low-grade anxiety, difficulty sleeping. It's not weakness, it's your brain wanting clarity. But here's the paradox. Growth requires periods where the outcome isn't clear. If everything is predictable, you're probably not evolving. There's also something called the expectation gap. This happens when reality doesn't match the story you told yourself. For example, you thought by 30 you'd feel established, but maybe you just feel tired. You thought love would feel secure and certain, but maybe it feels complex and layered. You thought success would feel fulfilling, but maybe it just feels normal. The gap between expectation and reality creates dissatisfaction, not because your life is bad, but because the internal story hasn't updated. And most of us never consciously update the story. We're still chasing the version of success we defined at 19, even though we're no longer that person. Another important concept is identity debt. Identity debt happens when you commit to a version of yourself that no longer fits. You chose a degree, a career path, a personality role in your friend group, maybe even a relationship dynamic, and years later you realize you've outgrown it. But changing direction feels like admitting you were wrong. So you stay, not because it fits, but because it would be expensive to change. Emotionally expensive, socially expensive, financially expensive, and so the tension builds quietly. But here's the truth. Admitting growth isn't admitting failure. It's acknowledging evolution. There's also the pressure of visible milestones. Society measures progress in visible markers. Marriage, promotions, property, titles, but internal growth doesn't show up in photos. Nobody posts, "Today I set a boundary. Today I admitted I was unhappy. Today I changed direction privately." But those moments matter more than milestones. And because internal growth isn't visible, it can feel like you're not moving at all, when in reality you're rebuilding foundations. Let's talk about comparison more deeply. Your brain uses comparison to assess safety and status. Thousands of years ago, this helped with survival. But now comparison is constant. You compare income, relationships, fitness, confidence, even happiness. But here's what most people don't realize. You are comparing your internal experience to someone else's external presentation. You feel your doubt. You see their confidence. You feel your fear. You see their highlight. That imbalance creates distortion. The brain fills in blanks with assumptions. They must have it figured out. They're ahead. They're certain. But certainty is often performance. Most adults are improvising quietly. Another layer to feeling lost is decision fatigue. Modern life requires more decisions than ever before. Career paths are not linear anymore. Relationships are more complex. Relocation is common. Options are endless. And while options sound freeing, they create pressure. Because if there are infinite paths, choosing one feels risky. You worry you're missing the better option. But no path reveals itself fully in advance. Clarity often comes after commitment, not before it. There's also something called delayed gratification fatigue. You work, you save, you plan, you build, but the reward feels far away, and humans are wired for short-term reinforcement. That's why scrolling feels good. That's why small dopamine hits are addictive. They offer immediate feedback, whereas meaningful growth is slow, subtle, gradual. You don't feel yourself becoming wiser. You don't feel yourself maturing day by day, but you are. In small recalibrations, and here's something important: not knowing what you want is different from not wanting anything. When people say, I don't know what I want, what they usually mean is, I don't know what feels aligned yet. That's discovery, not failure. Discovery takes exposure, experimentation, reflection, and sometimes wrong turns. But wrong turns are information, not proof of incompetence. It's also worth saying this: peace is not constant motivation. Peace is quiet alignment. It doesn't feel like adrenaline. It feels like steadiness. You wake up without dread. You move through your day without friction. You don't constantly fantasize about escape. That's how you know something fits. And if you don't feel that yet, it doesn't mean you're broken. It may just mean you're mid transition. Most people underestimate how long transitions take. Career shifts, identity shifts, value shifts. They're not overnight changes. They're gradual mental reorganizations. The brain rewires slowly. Beliefs update slowly. Confidence rebuilds slowly. And because it's slow, you think nothing is happening. But beneath the surface, structures are adjusting. So if you're in a season where things feel unclear, consider this possibility. You are not behind. You are between versions. The old version no longer fits fully. The new version isn't fully formed yet. That in-between space feels unstable, but it's necessary. It's construction, and construction is messy before it's stable. If you want to reduce that lost feeling practically, start with clarity in small areas. You don't need a 5-year plan. You need the next honest step. One boundary, one application, one conversation, one habit shift. Small clarity compounds. Momentum builds identity. Identity builds direction. And finally, it's okay if you don't have a dramatic life plan. You are allowed to evolve quietly. You are allowed to change your mind. You are allowed to recalibrate, because adulthood isn't about arriving. It's about refining over and over. And if it feels uncertain right now, that might not be a sign to panic. It might be a sign you're growing.